First of all, introducing our challenger.
Out of the blue corner.
He's going to step in and he does. It's all over.
Let's bring on the boom.
This is Eternal MMA.
Bones and I are back with another breakdown edition of the Eternal Insiders Podcast. Here to break down Eternal 94, the card that just went by in the Gold Coast, or on the Gold Coast, should I say, at the Southport Sharks. A spiritual home for Eternal MMA. What a card it was. It's always a great card with Eternal MMA. This one headlined by Darcy Vendy versus Matt Myers for the Eternal MMA Middleweight Championship. Darcy Vendy coming out on top and defending his Middleweight Championship for the first time, looking damn good while he was at it. That on top of a stacked lineup of a main card, and as always, an incredible list of prelims to boot. Here with Bones, my usual partner for these breakdown segments. He had the best seat in the house at Eternal MMA in the commentary booth. He saw all the fights from start to finish. And we're here to talk about him, here to talk about what was good, what was bad, and the way forward for the rest of the fighters and their performances. Matt, how are the fights for you, brother? Another excellent card on the Gold Coast. I know it was enjoyable. I was sitting on my couch here observing it, but you saw it firsthand, man. So how was it for you? It looked like a good time.
Yeah, it was sick. Yeah, it was really cool, bro. And loving the having Cole Noak back in the commentary booth. He's got such good analysis, so much experience in the sport. He's also familiar with a lot of fighters up there in Queensland, being a Sunshine Coast lad. And he's a great dude, man. So, yeah, loving that little cop we've got going up there with T and Cole Noak. So had a lot of fun from the broadcasting side. I thought Ali Mack coming on to do the director cameras, the intros, the fighter breakdowns was the fighter interviews was really cool as well. I think she's spot on. She really knows her stuff. So it was a fun team vibe. And in terms of like the fights, the fights are off the head, man. Like Southport always turns it up big time from start to finish. The crowd was mental up there. Of course, you had massive CMBT contingent. You had Josh Kuhn part of that, so they took up about 90% of the venue. And then there was the other 10% who showed up were pretty rowdy as well. So it was a great weekend of fights all up.
Yeah, I think the Eternal Avengers was the name. Maybe it was coined by MCT, but the Eternal Avengers I was hearing for that little ensemble for the broadcast team for you guys. What a team that is. But yeah, you're hitting it on the head, man. Yeah, good times. You and T were in good form as always.
Yeah, dude. And Blake Richardson, man.
The return of Blake Richardson, Hollywood Blake Richardson, baby. Yes. Yeah, I was so happy to see that man back in the cage. Welcome back, Blake Richardson.
Looking jacked and well moisturized. Looks like he's been flossing.
Hair.
Maybe twice a day as well. So teeth were looking, structurally sound and like free of spirulina and shit like that. So man, the Avengers, came together and kicked it out of the park, I reckon.
He's the Captain America player in that ensemble, I think. Certainly is.
Let's not go too deep into who the others are. But yeah, I appreciate that he's the Captain America for sure.
Well, it's here to talk about the fights, man. And we obviously had the prelims, a good list of amateur fights on the card, a number of good performances, a couple of good finishes there, a couple of really exciting prospects on the horizon that we did have. I lost count of the amount of prelims that we had. What do we have? We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 prelim fights all told. Now, there was a couple of fights there we can talk about. Obviously, we're here to break down the main card of the professional fights as we do on this podcast, but we'd be remiss to not touch on a couple of really good performances. I mean, you look through the list there and a couple of things you can point out. I mean, the feature prelim, you can start with Max Davidson versus Cage Fisher. That was an incredible fight with so many good little moments there. The returning Robin O'Neill as well with that was a fantastic fight with her and Healy Dayan, especially that last round. I really enjoyed that. Really showed the guys on the card how it's done. I really enjoyed watching that one there too. A couple other performances too, and I'll let you talk about what you liked as well. But Jake Lamb for me too in that catchweight 68 kilo fight. Jake Lamb in the first round with a big time knockout. I mean, it was only a small glimpse that we got to see of him, but I think that moved him to 2-0 as an amateur. For me, I just want to give him a shout out because that was an incredibly good performance. This guy looked like, for me, like already so many little tools that he already kind of looks like he's got, almost looking like a professional already. I really love that clean finish. That was the highlight for me on a number of highlights there for the prelim cards. I just want to give a shout out to Jake Lamb But you were there, like we said, firsthand, man. You saw the fights better than I did. So what was it? What were the couple of things that you liked on the prelim card?
Yeah, well, I think that there's two that I'd like to touch on. The feature prelim was incredibly entertaining, man. Like that, I said, Victoria has some secrets, and I wasn't talking about women's underwear, and that we're starting to come up there and show Queensland and the rest of the country what we're all about. Cage Fisher is one of those, super young, 19 years old. He competes regularly in padded striking fights in K1, and now notched up 5-0 as a amateur MMA fighter, and doing good things too. So take out Max Davidson. Well, Max Davidson's the number one guy in the country, ranked as an amateur. So big things on the horizon for him. Was wrapped for him to get it in the way he did. It was an incredibly exciting fight. He did well to get Max Davidson's high guard up, then would go around it with bent arm punches, go to the body. Of course, that big slam in the third round where he poked his tongue out, walked him around.
That was
across
so
the
much
ring.
fun. I love that moment. That was great. Yeah.
It was just sick, bro. And Max Davidson, he's super talented. He stuck to the game plan. Obviously, it was to lock on with the clinch and try and knee his head off. And, a couple of times he was close. So, yeah, two guys with a real bright future. But it was Cage Fisher all the way. So, yeah, big statement that he made. I think the other one was our girl Robin O'Neill, man, you touched on that. Healy Dayan, I thought, for a debutante fighter, looked incredible. She looked really calm. She, of course, very skilled right across the park. A long-time competitor in combat sports and in wrestling. Muay Thai started up in Wolves then, now at CMBT. So they're doing good things with her, but Robert O'Neill was just a step ahead. That really showed her the amount of time that she spent in the sport, mature footwork, played a very low-risk, high-percentage game of decision-making. Boxing was spot on, man, like mixing up the levels, good work to the body, and low kicks.
Man.
Did a lot of damage.
They were looking good early, those low kicks, mate. She was investing in those heaps. And just like looking at the two fighters as well, obviously it's the same weight class, but like two different body compositions. And I hope I'm saying this correctly, because I'm talking about two women fighters, but I mean like those kicks from Robin, because like the size of her legs compared to the size of like Healy's legs was a completely different thing. And I think that just paid dividends for her so much. Like they were just thudding into the thigh, into the calf of Healy Dayan, and that just paid off so well for her. And that last round, man, like just with those two girls going at it, like they were both throwing heat. Obviously, a lot of the first and second round from memory was a lot of Robin. But that final round for two amateur fighters on the come up, that was one of the more entertaining last rounds that I've seen in a while.
Yeah, it was sick. And it's not too, like, I try and stay like impartial as much as I can as a color commentator. But I spent a lot of time with Robin O'Neill, and I sense her energy was quite contagious as she walked out. She just was. Always. She had a really tough week, and to get there and to see the intensity with which she pursued her walkout. Like I went to give her a fist bump, bro. She left me hanging so hard in front of the crowd. I looked like such a dick. I looked like
she was in the zone, man. She wasn't seeing anything but the cage as she was walking in.
Nah, bro, and it was contagious. And then come out in that third round, she hit that takedown, and I jumped out of my seat, man. I was just so wrapped, bro. I was like, yeah, that was sick. And I forgot that I was supposed to be working, so I sat my ass back down. But it was really cool. And then to see the big fella Cam O'Neill, how much it meant to him in the post match when he was like, got a little something in his eye as the winners were being announced. That was really special as well. So yeah, it was cool, bro. It was cool, and a great fight to boot.
Yeah, and Robin handled herself very well. I mean, you just talk about everything she's been dealing with, even just to get back to the cage. Like I know she's dealt with some things, with health and injuries and that sort of stuff, just to get herself back to that point. And then the nice moment, paying tribute, I believe it was to her late grandfather as well. So she composed herself very well and said some really nice things, and called her shot, promoted herself. Promoted her promotion, obviously, for Proving Grounds Fight League coming up for 5 or 6, I believe it is. So shout out to the next Proving Grounds Fight League card that we have coming up. Hats off to Robin O'Neill. But yeah, great list of prelims, man. Always very entertaining with the prelim card and the amateur fights, but it led us into the main card. And one of my boys that I'm really hyped on, that I have been hyped on for a little while, Matty Ian out of Australian Top Team. First of all, what it must be said about Matty Ian is that he is 2 fights into his professional career, and he's now 2 fights into his pro career fighting against fighters that have both missed weight, of which he has beaten both of those guys. Now, if you pay attention to UFC stats, that's going against the grain a little bit. I know this is in the UFC, but typically speaking, the fighter that misses weight is more often than not the one that comes out on top. So Matty Ian is very much bucking that trend. We saw how heated he was in the original weigh-ins. I can't remember his opponent for his pro debut, but that was certainly a heated weigh-in when his opponent missed weight. I think this is a little more composed this time, but nothing but respect from Matty Ian after a really, really composed performance from him. He looks the goods, man. Like, everything about Matty Ian for coming in as a 1-0 fighter, I love everything about him, mate. I love his style in the cage. I love his fighting style. I love his technique. I love his speed. I love his footwork. Like, there's just so much to like about him. And just those guys at Australian Top Team are really starting to cultivate something really fantastic. Obviously, we had Farhud Kalatbar recently, one of the more recent Eternal MMA cards. I think the one just beforehand. I obviously had him on the podcast too. But everything that's going on down there in that gym seems to be a lot of fun. And Matty Ian is just sort of at the tip of that spear for those guys coming through. Gets the job done via decision there. But incredible performance against a very game opponent in Aliasa, Markel Aliasa. I still don't know if I'm butchering his name or not. But incredible fun fight. But Matty Ian too much, moves to 2-0 as a pro. Good performance from him, man. I love this kid a lot.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, he looked great, man. Like very mature performance, as you say, for a guy that's just had 2 professional fights. Real testament to how they have managed his amateur career and the fights that he had in that. Obviously, testament to the gym and the training, but the buck stops with Matty Ian and what he's invested into his own journey and how seriously he's taken it. He's got a massive future in the sport. It was a patient application of the game plan, I felt, against an incredibly dangerous guy. And Matty Ian kind of stripped the emotion away, from it, and was clinical about the way he set out on his path to victory. Good long use of his boxing, disrupted Alias's rhythm with inside low kicks. His left high kick, super fast. He would double up on it, go low, go high. That occupied Alias's right hand. I didn't get a chance to chat to Suman and Matty after, but I'd say that was potentially part of the plan, just keeping that right hand locked in nice and tight to Aliasa. And he got busy with the left hand a lot and the left side kicks, and I thought maybe he was trying to set up a right kick, and he did, which just showed the wherewithal that he had in that last 5 minutes to try and set something up in that fashion. Also against the cage, man, like he was very well drilled there. He did a really good job at winning inside frames, breaking Alias's posture, bringing it up, fighting at the end of levers, controlling the hands. Really smart application of cage wrestling and some great takedowns too. And when he was on the ground, Kyle Noak mentioned, I love the way that he stays tight. He had got a very tight, efficient style of MMA grappling that I think a lot of guys could learn from. And across the cage from him, Aliasa, I think he played his cards right. I reckon I'm pretty confident that Aliasa, if he came up against any other 1-0 bantamweight on that night in Australia, he probably would have been in the wing column. He just happened to come up against Matty Ian. So a big future for him in the sport. Obviously, you need to sort out some stuff with, his fight camp. Look, I don't wear the man's shoes, so 1,000,001 things can happen. So I'm not trying to cast shade on his journey, but he'll need to make weight if he's as a pro moving forward. But he looked good too. It was patient, was exciting. It's a good wrestling of his own, some creative stuff, and it's nice to have welcome both those guys into the the bantamweight division and some matches to make. I think there's some matches to make, particularly for Matty Ian. How's this? What about Matty Ian versus Connor Birch? Connor Birch, another.
Yeah, could you imagine that fight? Oh my God, that's amazing. Yes, sign me up for that.
Another 2-0 guy, another 2-0 guy on a bit of a tear.
That's a high level fight, bro, for like a couple of 2-0 guys. That's massive. That's huge. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. But yeah, man, like the bantamweight's getting very good, bro. There's a lot of these guys who have had, kind of less than 5 fights who are really starting to come up. And Rod Costa at the end of his fight, we'll talk about that, but he's saying, a role that he'd like to occupy in regional MMA is to maybe fight a couple of these up and comers after the birth of his child and kind of see if they've got what it takes. So, with another couple of fights, we might be seeing some of these really class guys like Matty Ian and Connor Birch, Chris Usajanowski going on and taking a guy like Rod Costa. So the bantamweight division is looking the goods.
What a murderer's row that is. I mean, the 3 guys you just mentioned there, Matty Ian, Connor Birch, Chris Usajanowski, like just a couple of real slick hands, a couple of real slick strikers in that mix. Like, you throw those guys into some sort of little tournament. I mean, that's fireworks. I'm dreaming there. And look, I don't like to speculate too much about the future of guys and where they can possibly go, especially this early in their career. But, I mean, I'm just so impressed with Matty Ian. Like, when you look at him, and you talked about how well he's been managed through the early part of his amateur career up until this point. Like, what do you think the ceiling is for a guy like him? Like, am I getting ahead of myself here? Because, like, I think this guy just looks the goods already. Like, I think this is his future is in the UFC. Like, he's got that kind of skill level. He looks like a guy that's had 4, 5, 6 plus pro fights. Like, I really think this is a guy like that we should be watching out for the big time.
Yeah, like the hallmarks are there of a guy who can go all the way. I think it's such a fickle sport. The sport, like injuries. Everyone's always got a puncher's chance. To cop an L at the wrong time when you are winning a fight, or to life circumstances. There's so many things that need to go right for you in the sport. And the UFC these days, they really, especially at the lighter weight classes, the real competitive ones like bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight, where there's a really stacked roster. You need to have to be able to demonstrate a resume. There's gone are the days where guys were getting into the UFC like 5-0 and stuff, unless they're something real special. Dana White Contender Series maybe, but I think the guys that really do well in the UFC are the guys with a body of work. Even like a couple of losses, like against Jack Dalla or something like that, who been in there, they know what it takes to lose. They've had the tough fights by the time they get in there. So I think he's in the perfect place. Eternal's got such a great roster, as we've mentioned, Murderer's Row, and experienced guys at the top, like Rod Cosson, the champion, Kurt Ito. Like the fights are there. The fights are there, and over time he'll have those fights. And I'm sure if he keeps on the trajectory he's going, then the ceiling is however high.
No, you've made a big fan out of me, Matty Ian. Like I said, I like everything about you, your fighting style, everything on social media. There was a couple of times I saw you on social media where I thought I was looking at Brian Ortega at parts with, the hair sort of black. Legitimately fooled me to thinking I was looking at a Brian Ortega post. Brian Ortega, my favorite fighter of all time in terms of mixed martial arts. So, it was a little bit of a shout for me. But keen to see the rest of his career. Again, big things happening at Australian top team. We had also Declan Wolfenden versus Connor Downey in the welterweight division. Now, this was a fight that, if you look online, is being scrutinised a little bit in terms of the judges' scorecards. Now, just jumping out ahead of this, I didn't actually see the last round of this fight. I was indisposed for the last round, but the first 2 rounds of this fight, from memory, looking at this one, I'm pretty sure that I had Wolfenden for round 1, Wolfenden for round 2. I did briefly go back and try to catch some of the last round where I think Downey was sort of having a lot of his way in the grappling, again, from memory. It looked like it was at least a close fight, and I'm seeing a lot of calls of robbery this, and one judge gave it 30-27, which, I definitely know it wasn't a 30-27 because I think Wolfenden's got at least one of those particular rounds. But it looked like, it was a relatively entertaining fight to start with. A bit of a kickboxing match for the first couple of rounds between a couple of hungry up-and-coming welterweights. Keen for your thoughts in terms of this fight. I don't know if you want to give your opinions in terms of who you thought won the fight. But nonetheless, a couple of guys on the come-up. It was a close fight regardless. Connor Downey defeating Declan Wolfenden in the end by decision.
Yeah. One thing I'm always conscious of when I'm talking about fights is the guy who won the fight is the guy who got his hand raised at the end, and it was the guy who the judges awarded the fight to, and that was Connor Downey. So, first of all, mad props to Connor Downey. He did enough to win on the night. Two of the judges gave it to him. He showed some new. He showed that he wanted to mix it up on the striking when primarily he's been a grappler in his previous fights, and he did enough on the feet in the eye of two of the judges. So he did that by moving laterally around the cage, staying incredibly busy with and a high volume with kicks and punches. The stats told the tale at the end. He landed more punches and kicks than Wolfenden, and he was able to execute a takedown as well. Now, I about 2 or 3 years ago, I went into a judging course. I was like, man, if I'm gonna have a perspective as like a color perspective on combat sports, I want to put my best possible foot forward from an educated position. So I went in, became an official judge with Klanger and Steve Percival. So the UFC judges course, which was put on by the Victorian Combat Sports Board, and that involves going right through the gamut of the rules, the scoring criteria, breaking down a lot of fights and scoring fights, and then workshopping them and having to explain yourself. So I've been through that process. So I'm not just here as like a dude on Reddit with like cheesels on my chest and like mum cooking meatloaf for me in the kitchen. I actually have an educated opinion here. And despite that, one thing that I know is that people are always, the way our scoring is people are always going to have like a subjective opinion, even within the scoring criteria that we have, because it relies on subjectivity, how you perceived a certain strike landing and whether or not it was significant striking, significant grappling, the criteria, right? For me, Connor Downey landed more volume, but when he was kicking and punching, it wasn't often breaking the posture or moving or having much of a visible effect on Declan Wolfenden, which is one thing I look for when I'm judging a fight. And when Declan was hitting him, it was having a noticeable impact often, particularly the right hand would snap the head back. The kicks would break his posture. He would fold over a little bit. Mind you, Downey had some really powerful shots too. I remember particularly to the leg, and he was able to take the back at one point. So that is effective grappling. Whenever you can take the back, that's effective grappling. Although, to be considered, he wasn't able to get under the chin and threaten anything meaningful there. And on the reverse side, Declan was able to get top position and do some heavy ground and pound, particularly with the elbows, right? So for me, I've watched this fight back twice because I knew we would talk about this fight. So I watched it live. I thought Declan won, and when that's how I judged it based off what I was seeing from the broadcast feed and from my position cage side. And then when I watched it back, I can see it was probably closer than certainly closer than I thought watching it live. But I still thought Declan won. But that it doesn't matter when you've got three judges positioned around the cage. They perceive certain strikes differently, and you might remember in the first two rounds there was a couple of occasions where Declan was off balance and he getting out of the way a right hand or slightly clipped by it or something, and he fell over, and it happened twice, I think. Now, depending where you're situated around the cage, you'll perceive that moment differently. You might think it connected, you might think it not, you might see clear air. So it just depending where you're sitting, how you perceive the strikes, how you perceive the grappling leads to some subjectivity. But I think at the end of the day, Declan, when he watches it back, he'll probably go, mate, there's more I could have done. I didn't show everything I've got, and I need to do more next time to win. So a guy young in his career, he'll take that on board, and he'll improve in his next fight, I'm sure, especially coming out of Team Copton and the excellent coaches that they have there. And for Connor Downey, he got the win, and kudos to him. Congratulations to him. Declan Wolfenden's a really bad man. So.
No, and I really like that insight too, because I'd like to watch that fight back as well. And what you said before in terms of watching the fight and seeing a bit more of that output from Conor and a bit more of the like damaging striking, like snapping the head back at Conor Downey. I think that's why initially watching the fight through those first couple of rounds, that's kind of what made me think more Declan Wolfenden there too. But I would like to watch that fight back again. It's one of those old sayings that we got, like, don't leave it in the hands of the judges if you're upset with the decision. But yeah, like, that is a really good couple of points in terms of, the judges obviously seeing different things from different parts of the cage. We interpret things differently, and maybe if we watch the fight back a couple of times, but take nothing away from Conor Downey. Still a good performance. He moves to 2-1. Declan Wolfenden will certainly be back there. We had Peter Templar go to another level again. Like, what a resurgence he's made in the early part of his career. After starting his career 0-2 as a fighter in the professional ranks, now 3-2 after submitting a really hungry up and coming prospect out of Absolute MMA in Dylan Lahari. Submits him with the triangle choke in the first round. Man, this fight started off like with an absolute bang. Like, Lahari coming out, swinging, gets him up against the cage. A little bit of a reminder, didn't quite happen in the same way, but if you recall back to one of the DC versus Gustafsson fights where Gustafsson goes for a bit of a ride, flips over, over the top when DC throws him over his shoulder. Kind of reminded me a bit of that as Templar was trying to hang on to that Kimura on Lahari in that first round. And then Templar gets slammed on the cage as well, from Lahari in that early part, but just sinks up that triangle choke. I think that's 3 finishes now. For his 3 wins is Peter Templar, just going from strength to strength. The move to CMBT has just continued or aided a nice continuous upward trajectory for his career. We've got to remember Peter Templar as well. The first guy to defeat our former welterweight champion Lachlan Sitton has just gone from strength to strength since then. We talked about this on the last podcast we did, that he's been spending some time outside of mixed martial arts and getting himself into some Muay Thai fights. He didn't need the Muay Thai in this one. He went back to where he butters his bread and got the submission done. But Peter Templar, again, just going from strength to strength. What a absolute chiseled man this is too. Like, looked great, just looks fit as a fiddle. His career is really having a nice resurgence here, now 3-2 in his career. What did you see for the short time this fight lasted, man? Hats off Peter Templar.
Yeah, well, dude, if you jump on the ground with Peter Templar, you're playing Russian roulette. I think that's the reality. No matter how good you are at grappling, that guy's incredibly strong, man. You can just see it in his how he's put together. That's like a grappler's body, and his squeeze is incredible. I can tell by watching him. Excuse me. And I think, now with the variety and the submissions he's been able to put on over the course of his career, the efficiency with which he's been able to do it, and the speed with which he's been able to get people out of there, it's I think more and more people have got to be reluctant to go to the ground with Peter Templar. Dylan Lahari, I felt he would have a striking advantage on the feet. We didn't see enough of that transpire to really kind of tick that box and as like a correct assertion, but it's the way it looked to me. I think Dylan Lahari was just fell in the moment, like he was loving being in there. He landed a couple punches. It was a great slam, but we almost went 360 with it, but he just ended up in Peter Templar's wheelhouse. So Dylan Lahari, I know, is kind of looking back on that, just being like, shit, man. Like it's a gnarly thing to be in a fight and not really feel like you've been in a fight, because you're only in there for a short amount of time, and you make a decision and you get submitted, and like kind of nothing hurts, and you've done all that work, and just kind of sitting back and going, I coulda, shoulda, woulda, but I didn't. Which is probably a good thing for Dylan Lahari, like to take that away. And he's got so much talent, that dude, and in such a good place with all those welterweights down at Absolute. I think about like a young Jack Jenkins, right? So young Jack Jenkins, we know, that what he's doing in the sport these days. We know what he did on the regional scene. Like, I remember a fight that he had a long time ago. Well, he'd only had like 2 or 3 fights, and he fought Jesse Medina and was just wiping the floor with Jesse Medina on the feet. But everyone knows that Jesse Medina on the ground is so that dangerous. And Jack took him down. I think it might have been in the third round or the second round, third round. Took him down and got triangled. And I know what that did for the evolution of Jack Jenkins. It was like a really good learning. So I think maybe the same learning exists there for a guy like Dylan Lahari. Well, for Peter Templar, I think he's probably only one more good win away from getting an opportunity at the champ, and what a fight that would be. Two excellent grapplers.
Another
going
opportunity at the champ.
Pardon?
Another opportunity at the champ because they've already.
Yeah,
fought.
sorry, another opportunity. Yeah, so that would be really exciting. I think Dylan Lahari only it was 1-0 when they went into this, so he probably needs one more, maybe a guy like I don't know, like a D Samasoni. I'm not sure what he's up to these days. Like a guy who really wants to hang out on the feet and punch, or a guy with a bunch of fights under his belt. I'd love to see Peter Templar get one more and then move on to big things. So it was mate, he turned the joint on his head. There's a few Peter Templar fans in the crowd.
Yeah, definitely one out of me too. And I mean, Dylan Lahari, I mean, if you look at, even you just look through his amateur career, I mean, he submitted his way through pretty much all of his opponents. Only lost 2 out of his 9 fights, I think, from his amateur career. So definitely he'll be back. And definitely sure there's some wins in his pro career for sure, but the night definitely belonged to Peter Templar. And I mean, we touched on this in the last podcast we did in the setup for this card, but you look through Peter's record in terms of his submissions, and every single one of his wins through his amateurs up until his pro career are all freaking different. So you go Americana, armbar, rear naked choke, mounted triangle choke, back to rear naked choke, and now for this one, like just a traditional like triangle choke. So he's got like a bit of an arsenal, some diversity in terms of his submission game. So I'm counting on you, Peter Templar, to break out something different again. Something a little more, let's spice things up. I don't know what we've got for the next one. Maybe an anaconda or something like that you can add to the record to cap off this nice little list that you got going in Tapology here, man. It looks very pretty, but big future for him. And I mean, you said it before, like maybe he's only a win or 2 away from getting another shot at the champ. I mean, of course, when they originally fought, Dave Martinez was not the champ there now, but a lot of growing that Peter Templar has done since then. Whatever happens for him next, like sign me up. This kid's exciting. He's got the goods. I think the Muay Thai fights that he's been doing outside of mixed martial arts are going to serve him well to be an extremely well-rounded fighter. But if he can revert back to that submission game that he's got, that's trouble for like the rest of the welterweight division there for sure. And a man that you just mentioned before, Rod Costa, the returning Rod Costa, coming against the very returning Tim Moore here. A couple of OGs in the game here for Eternal MMA, especially returning Tim Moore, a man that fought on the first 3 Eternal MMA cards, a former flyweight champion as well. These guys have already fought in a grappling match recently too, and get it done inside the cage, or get it on inside the cage, should I say. Rod Costa coming out on top in this one again, going to 9-8 in his career. Now, I'll let you talk about this, but Tim Moore, he looks so good early in the fight. Like, striking was on point. It was a real pleasure to watch him. He obviously lost the fight in the second round from a head and arm choke from Rod Costa there. But like, you wouldn't know the guy's been outside of the cage for 6 years. I mean, he looked incredibly good shape. I really enjoyed the striking game from him, but then it just becomes classic Rod Costa. Gets him to the ground where he wants it to be, and finishes with that slick submission. And as you said before, says he wants to continue his career and maybe give a couple of up-and-comers a chance. But it was really cool to see these guys in the cage together. We talked about it before this card in the last podcast and said that it was a really fun little matchup to see these guys come in against each other, and we got our money's worth.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, but Tim Moore looked awesome, man. I got a little buzz out of seeing him in there too. I've been I've been following Eternal the whole way through from the beginning. And who kind of grew up with Eternal MMA watching Tim Moore fight, and it was really cool to see him back in there. I think he looked, even though that was up higher than they wanted to fight, I thought he looked really good. I thought he looked really good at featherweight. Like he's a big boy. He'd be scary at the moment at bantam or at that original catchweight they'd organised. He had power, he had speed. He didn't look like he had the jitters that you might expect of a guy who had 6 years out of the cage. He's been really creative with his striking. He looked improved. To me, that's what he looked like. He looked like a better version of Quick Draw. Obviously, the game's come a long way, and the team that he's gone on around about there, the level of that room will really lift. I saw some glimpses of a couple little things that I see Brenton Mumford do kind of come through, which was cool. But once Rod Costa gets it down into his world, it's his world, and he's the king of it. Rod Costa, I mentioned on the broadcast, his striking is always underrated because his grappling just kind of overshadows it with its brilliance. He's got an excellent rolling high guard, so he catches the majority of the strikes that come through up high, and he's really good at timing his low kicks. He was smashing Tim Moore's leg, and his jab's got almost zero tell on it, and because he plays such a high guard, it comes straight down the pipe. So his striking looked good too, which Tim Moore, recognised that as a veteran as he poked and prodded, and it was meaning that Tim Moore was needing to lead to the body, and we saw a game that they were playing where Rod Costa would have his back up against the fence for the most part, and Moore was tracking him like a heat-seeking missile. But the timing on the takedown, the last takedown was superb, man. Just kind of drew him in. At that takedown, when you see Rod Costa grapple, when you see him wrestle, it's so economical in terms of his output. He never puts too much into a shot. He's really good at timing it, whether it's up against the cage and dragging someone down by off balancing them or taking their back up against the cage. He's just so good at that, man. He's such a veteran. He's such a high level competitor. And on the ground, likewise, his grappling. So once again, is so economical as you expect for a guy of that level. That hidden arm choke that he kept threatening from Mount, was you use the hidden arm choke from Mount for a variety of reasons. You use it to use it. You use it to submit a guy, or you use it to keep them flat on their back. So you make them defend it over and over, or you use it to take their back. And black belts of that ilk have systemized approaches like that, and he had his elbow in the right position, he had his head in the right position, so he jumped off Mount and had a crack, and man, it was tight. It was a very quick tap.
Yeah, so one detail there too, and hats off for Rod Costa first and foremost for getting the job done the way that Rod Costa does. One of my favorite people in the sport, but I didn't actually realize until literally after the fact that the original catchweight fight that this had been announced for actually ended up being a featherweight fight. When did this happen? Because I missed the memo on this.
Yeah, I got like a message from the production team like a couple of days before the event.
Okay.
I think saying that it had been shifted to featherweight, and I didn't actually ask any questions about it, because when you got two veterans, sometimes they'll just be like, "Hey, bro, cutting weight sucks, man."
Yeah,
we're combined. We've had like 40 fights. Should we just do it at this weight? So I'm not sure what happened there, but we saw Costa, acknowledge some fault on his behalf. It just is what it is. I don't think the weight affected the outcome of the fight in any way, shape, or form. They looked evenly matched there, and it just kind of is what it is. I'm sure Tim Moore wouldn't have minded like a couple of extra scoops of sugar on his cornflakes in the morning in fight week.
I don't think that man eats sugar by the looks of him. So, I'm jealous of the man that's looking that good for 37 or 38 years of age that he is now. But he originally said, at least on social media before the fight, in one of his posts, that this would be a good fight for him to come back for and be the one to kind of hang it up. And then talking to him on the podcast, and then hearing just sort of some of the things he kind of said in the lead up to the fight, and even in the cage after the fight, that this might not necessarily be it. I can't remember the exact words that he said after the fight, but it sounds like that he'd be interested in still keeping his career going. I'd like to see him back in there because I thought he looked good.
He looked awesome, bro. I'd love to say it's very rare that I send a message to a fighter after a fight. I kind of leave those two worlds separate. But I sent one to Joseph, Big Sexy Lutch and Easy after he had that crazy comeback fight at the end of last year.
Shout out.
Shout out the bro. the bro Joe, and I sent one to Tim after that fight. I was like, "Hey man, whatever you do next." So it was like a pleasure to call you fight, and you look fantastic, because I was genuinely like really happy to see him in there. So, mate, if we get that opportunity again, bring it on. And he looked great. There's a ton of great fights to make with a guy like Tim Moore in that division.
Let's see him back. Not to be outdone in terms of getting a really nice early round one submission was Jesse Medina trying to one-up Peter Templar by getting the job done over Josh Kuhn with a rear naked choke submission in the first round. Obviously, this was Josh Kuhn's show. So many of the tickets in the building must have been sold pretty much single-handedly off the back of Josh Kuhn. We know how popular he is up at that part of the country. A lot of fans in attendance would have been very disappointed for Josh. Coming back after 18 months and getting himself back inside the cage didn't go his way. Had some a little bit of adversity through the training camp, but I don't think that had sort of too much to do with the outcome. He looked like he was ready to go. I spoke to him on the podcast. He was very much looking forward to this one. He knew the dangers of Jesse Medina in terms of where he is dangerous. Well, I think like 15 of his 16 fights, he is ended by a finish, and I think 13 of those are now 14. Will be by way of submission. This was pretty much over before it kind of got going. Josh Kuhn looked like he was on top, at least for that first part of that little kind of grappling exchange, and then just Jesse Medina out the back door, straight onto the back, sinks in the rear naked choke. Josh Kuhn goes to sleep, and Jesse Medina moves over 500 for his professional career at 17 and 16. Quietly goes about his business, does Jesse Medina, but he's a very dangerous man, and he looked good for as many seconds as this fight lasted. Hats off Jesse Medina.
They're at the Jiu-Jitsu Worlds, when was it? Like about 5-6 years ago now, like half guard was like all the rage. So guys were out there and they were like pulling half guard and getting the points for the sweep after, or taking the back in extreme circumstances. But a guy like Jesse Medina, he doesn't mind being on the bottom off a failed takedown if he's that deep in half guard with an underhook. It's just so hard then for Kuhn to kind of back it up and implement a whizzer. And if you don't have a whizzer in that kind of half guard system, you're either going to get two things. One, you're going to get swept, or you're going to get your back taken. And it was just so dry. It was just the best moment possible for Medina to find himself there. And then the sequence that he moved from half guard to the back to the choke was like 101. It's like how if you're in a jiu-jitsu class, it's like how you would teach that series step by step. And that last picture of how far the arm was under Josh's neck, how deep the choke was locked in mechanically from the back.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Bro, like
couldn't even see his hand.
His head was coming off, man. Like it was going to go if the referee hadn't intervened there. That was crazy. First off, bro, I'm so happy for Jesse Medina. Do you see, like, he was grinning like a Cheshire cat.
Couldn't wipe his face, bro, yeah.
Like, he was funky cold, At 32 professional fights, that was his 33rd. He was thinking about retiring. He's not even that old, same age as Josh Kuhn. He's like 32, 33 years old. Has been he was 10-2 at one stage. I remember he was 10-2 about 9 years ago, bro. He was like at the top of the game in Australia, but the recent years haven't been kind to him. He's copped a lot of hours. I think he was on like a 5-fight losing streak. So to see like the weight off that man's shoulders was kind of all that can be really good about the sport, and he had a great corner there. Luistro, he had Salkilden, Colin Salkilden, which was an interesting connection, actually, him being a Mildura lad from the border town of New South Wales and Victoria, and then being from Perth. But that was cool to see.
I think it's the Addict Sports connection because he's represented by Addict Sports. Shout out to Jasmine, and so is Quillen Salkilled. So I think that's maybe where the link up kind of comes from.
Yeah, probably. And well done for Jasmine for locking in that fight and Addict Sports, and to those guys. That was a great win. And for Josh, fuck, man, this game's like so cruel sometimes. And I'm sure many guys have woken up on a Sunday morning with a black eye, fractured orbital, missing teeth, and being like, oh man, like that fight versus Josh Kuhn last night sucked. I was out there for 10 seconds and got knocked out. But sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail, and it just wasn't his night. It just wasn't his night.
You said something there before about Jesse Medina with a big grin on his face and coming off that 5-fight losing streak, like you said. Like that's got to feel good. I've talked to Jesse once before, and I really like his style. Just goes about his business in a quiet manner. For a young bloke that's had 33 pro fights or whatever it is now, like just an incredible journey he's been on. And like you said, maybe his career didn't sort of pan out the way he kind of wanted it to, based on the way it started and the way it's kind of gone recently. But this is just one for him to enjoy, to come in against like a dangerous guy like Josh Kuhn in Josh Kuhn's hometown, a rejuvenated Josh Kuhn, with big ambitions for what he wants to do next and fire in his hands, like itchy trigger finger, good to go. And Jesse Medina just comes in and spoils the hometown party and gets to go home with that big old smile on his face. Couldn't be happier for the man. Well done, Jesse Medina. And maybe you can turn this little ship around and go on a little 5-fight winning streak. You never know, to really sort of top things off. But really, really pleased for him. And Josh Kuhn, he was all smiles after it. He kind of gave that little shake of the head, like, damn, like I got caught. He had a laugh. Like that man's winning in life. You know what I mean? So I'm sure he's disappointed. He go away with not really sort of any scratches or anything like that, get to go home to his beautiful family and, continue enjoying his life. Hopefully we see him back there again to have a scrap because, for a guy that hasn't been fighting very long, we talked about this in the last podcast where he hasn't really been even hitting pads that many years. He's done so much positive damage in such a short amount of time with that massive run that he went on early in his career with the 6 fights with 6 wins inside a minute for his amateur career and his pro career. So I've got no doubt that if he still keeps going, we're going to see a couple more first-round knockouts from Josh Kuhn. But the night was for Jesse Medina. Hats off to him. Looking forward to seeing what's next for those guys. But the night truly belonged to the middleweight champion for Eternal MMA, Darcy Vendy, defending his title for the first time against the former champion in Matt Myers, defeating him via round 3 submission with the rear naked choke. Looked fantastic doing it as well. He looked fantastic, obviously, in the first fight that earned him the belt when he knocked out John Martin Fraser. John Martin Fraser and Matt Myers, don't get it twisted, 2 of the scariest middleweights in the country, if not the world. And Darcy Vendy has just finished them both back-to-back. If it wasn't already clear that Darcy Vendy is the main man in Australia in terms of middleweight division, he's definitely cementing it now with that performance over Matt Myers. Because Matt Myers, like one of the most, forget middleweight, like one of the most dangerous men that we have in the country, looking to come back after his own layoff. And look, he looked good. He didn't get much of a chance to get off too much of his offense, but in terms of how he approached the fight and how he came out and how he was getting off his strikes, at least in the early part when he was sort of able to, like he looked back, man. And, Darcy Vendy was able to find his moments and then realized in the third round that, hey, look, this is my fight if I take this to the ground. He realized that, in the first round, he realized a lot more of it in the second round. And look, once he had Matt Myers on the ground, and Matt was doing such a good job, like trying to scramble and trying to get himself out of those positions, and he was rolling through those positions. And Darcy just I've never seen anyone make Matt Myers kind of look almost like a welterweight, but that's how big Darcy Vendy looks, man. And he just looked like an absolute man mountain on top of Matt Myers, just absolutely suffocated him and, got the job done, putting him to sleep, just to show up Jesse Medina, putting Josh Kuhn to sleep and really cement himself as the king of the middleweights is Darcy, the usurper Vendy. So massive performance for him. He called his shot massively afterwards. Once he's shot in the UFC, I wouldn't be one to deny him that. I don't know what comes next for him. But all I know is that this was truly, if it was the coronation in the fight against John Martin Fraser, this was certainly just cementing his position as one of the best fighters in the country in the middleweight division. Massive performance from the usurper Darcy Vendy, retaining his middleweight championship.
Yeah. It was for me. It was A+. It's really hard to fault anything Darcy Vendy did in that fight. He just looked complete performance against like Matt Myers. Was doing a lot of really good things too. It was incredibly dangerous, especially in the first round. Darcy Vendy was having a lot of success at making better decisions, though, I think, along the way. It's like a high-level game of really violent chess. And Matt Myers made a couple of decisions in line with who he is as a fighter, right? He's just an entertainment machine. He loves to do crazy shit. And that often led to a scramble where they're in the ground and they're in the grapple. And two things Darcy Vendy did that had a huge impact on this fight. One was like the cross wrist grip from Turtle, so always controlling cross body arm with the hand in place, controlling the end of the lever, and he did an excellent job of trapping Matt Myers' legs. So he would always have like a Turk or what's the other name for like an Iowa ride. He'd always use it, getting his legs involved as an extra set of hands to control the lower body of Matt, which then allows him to sustain a level of attacks with ground and pound and short elbows, and it was just relentless. Like it never stopped. It was a really impressive performance from Darcy, and I wouldn't be all surprised if he now moves on to the Dana White Contender Series, which is, I think they do a lot of the roll call for it at this time of year, and then start locking in who they're going to have. So it's probably pretty good timing too, and on such a big show on UFC Fight Pass, and with a pretty impressive call out too there, and had the crowd going. I think he put himself in pretty good stead. If that doesn't eventuate, the only other guy, should he still even be around, I think would be Cam Rolston. I'd love to see that fight, and we may see it in the UFC. Who knows? But big Cam Rolston, obviously, I don't know what the rankings are. He's probably the number one ranked guy in the region. Darcy might be after that fight, but that'd be a really cool fight. But I think Darcy might get the phone call in the next month to go up to Dana White's Contender Series.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things there, because you mentioned Cam Rouston. Like, I had that thought as well, but it wasn't long after I had that thought. Now, I don't know if this necessarily means much in terms of them not matching up against each other, but Cam Rouston looked like he was getting some rounds in up at the Fight Center on social media recently. So I don't know if those guys were training together or anything like that, or how familiar they are with each other. But look, if that was a fight in the middleweight division to see who the king is around here, definitely, put my hand up for that one, certainly. But look, in terms of Darcy Vendy, if this was his last performance in Australia and he does get the call up to the Contender Series, I think it's a good time for a couple of reasons. First of all, I mean, you touched on it's kind of that right time of the year, but the middleweight division in the UFC kind of does need... It really kind of does need a bit of a shake-up because it's getting, especially in that kind of top 15, it's not the stalest division in the UFC, but to me, it's sort of not too far off it. So in terms of like the UFC sort of trying to reach out and scope some more talent around the world, I think that'd be a really good sort of in for Darcy Vendy. Maybe getting his chance, certainly well-deserved, but I mean, in terms of some other divisions where guys might have to extend themselves a little further in their career because there is a bit of a logjam of talent in some other divisions, I think middleweight is wide open, I should sort of say. Look, if that's the next call for Darcy Vendy, I think he's more than earned it. And I didn't know he had that kind of shout out in him when he got on the mic there, because he's so reserved and, I don't say softly spoken, but, keeps his emotions fairly well in check. So hats off to you, Darcy Vendy, for that massive call to your own. Like, get yours, mate. Like, get on the mic and call for your shot. That was a cool thing to see.
Yeah, big time, yeah. Hey, bro, I was like sitting at the airport the next day, like Coolangatta Airport, watching the UFC, and I was watching Vittoria versus Delize, and I was just saying, man, like our main event last night was so much more entertaining than this.
Was that
love
fight
to
shit?
see.
I didn't watch it, man. I think I saw you post on Instagram about, you made reference to it being like an old punch bowl or something like that, and I'm like, I'm not even going to bother with this. I think we've already seen them fight once, Vittoria and Delize. Am I going nuts? But I'm assuming it wasn't.
It was a real controversial decision too. They thought Delize won. Anyway, it screwed my picks up yesterday. If you're saving for a house or anything like that, don't follow my picks, because I'm not having a very good run of it at the moment.
Yeah, because you picked Kurt Holloway after over Hernandez, and I was going to text you and say reverse that pick, because that wasn't the way I had it. But hey, look, I'm no expert.
What I said is, this is my pick, but don't bet on that fight, because you just don't bet on Hernandez fights, because he's just, you just don't bet on him as a rule. But, when I was watching that fight, bro, that main event, I was thinking, man, just chuck Darcy Vendy in with these two guys and he'll have an absolute crack, and exciting. I totally agree. So hopefully we do see him up there. And for Matt Myers, man, like there's a ton of really fun fights for that guy on Australian soil. Would just, he happened to run into the best guy that night, like a Bleb Bretag and Matt Myers would just be a sick fight, bro, if they threw down There's a ton of really cool fights for him, and he'll probably need a little bit of time, I think, to recover from that fight because he took a little bit of damage. I know he's incredibly disappointed. He's a real competitor, man, but wherever Matt Myers is fighting, you'll find me cage side, no doubt.
Yeah, maybe even like an Alfred Stoddard. I mean, I don't know if Alfred Stoddard was on the source that night, but every time I turned a page on Instagram, I was seeing Alfred Stoddard on every second page on Instagram going, hi, like calling out for, I don't even know what he was talking about, but I'm a big fan of Alfred Stoddard, but like every time like I looked over, it's just Alfred Stoddard on some random page, just like calling out for random people. So maybe that's a good matchup we could see in the future. I don't know. But Matt Myers, look good to see him back regardless off that injury, back in the cage, look good. Can't wait to see him keep the train rolling because he deserves big things in his career and he's a very dangerous man. He just came up against a better man in Darcy Vendy after this night. I thought he alluded to King Darcy Vendy going forward. I like the Usurper Darcy Vendy. I know what it means. I don't really care if he is the king now. Like the Usurper Darcy Vendy, there's more work to be done. You're the king here in Australia, but if you go across the UFC, there's many more crowns that you can go after there. So I think we stick with the Usurper Darcy Vendy. So it was his night for Eternal 94. Stellar night of fights that it was from absolute top to bottom. As always, as it is with Eternal MMA, we got some good announcements going forward too. What we announced, 4 cards too. Started off with the Proving Grounds 6, which is coming up on the 12th of April. The aforementioned Robert O'Neill, her amateur promotion there, finally back and putting on some incredible fights that they do in the amateur ranks. This is a cool one. Eternal 95 in Logan City. Now, I'm not as in tune with the significance of Logan City. I know that's where the fight center is in terms of the gym we've just talked about, Ben Johnson's gym, and of course where Darcy Vendy trains out of. But I heard some rumblings or some calls for Eternal MMA returning to Logan City. Can you talk to me? I don't know if you're a Victoria boy too, but can you talk to me a little about the significance of Eternal going to Logan City? Is this big? I don't really know much about the city itself. Like, what is the significance here?
Well, the where Logan's situated is in between Brisbane and Gold Coast, so it's kind of right. You get Brisbane there's so many good gyms up there. Team Compton's, etc. It would be nice for them to have something a little bit closer to home as well. Obviously, TFC in the close vicinity, but it's not too far for the Gold Coast and Burleigh Gym, Sunshine Coast, just on the other side of Brisbane. It's a little bit closer for them. So it's really well positioned, but it gives, fight fans and Eternal fans in that area an opportunity to have something at home. And the venue itself, it's worth going and checking out the venue online and having a quick squiz. It's going to be pretty special. It's visually spectacular. It's going to be a really awesome place to watch fights, to fight, to commentate, to wait tables. I don't know, man. It's going to be a hell of a night up in Logan, and those people in Logan, they know how to have a good time. Let's just put it that way. So it's going to, mate, I can't wait. I'm really pumped for that.
Yeah, well, that goes down on May 3rd. I believe I did see there were some early bird specials there for maybe a little bit of a discount if you get your tickets early, which you can get at eternalmma.com. So don't take my word for it. Jump on eternalmma.com and check them out for yourself and get down to Logan City for Eternal 95. That'll be followed by a return to the Gold Coast for Eternal 96. That goes down on June 21st. And we've also got a return to Perth, no doubt at the Perth. Yes, it is the Perth HPC, newly formed Perth HPC for Eternal 97. That goes down on the 28th of June. To my knowledge, no fights officially announced for this, but from what I'm hearing, from what you said on the broadcast as well, some really good sounding fights that are being rumoured for these couple of cards. So let's get the anticipation high for this run of cards coming up. But good to see that we're stacking the deck. More good cards to sink our teeth into. Logan City, Gold Coast, Perth for the next upcoming cards. We've got a lot to look forward to, man. I'm very excited.
Yeah, incredible run, man. It's 2025 is off to an absolute banger. We're probably about a third of the way through now, though. It's going quick, man. But there's off the back of Logan, back to Gold Coast, up to Perth, man. And some of the fights that are getting discussed for those, and some of the ones that are already locked in, you'd want to get your tickets pretty quick because they're going to sell out incredibly fast. So, good time to be an Eternal MMA fan, folks.
Good time to be an Eternal MMA fan, and just to mirror those sentiments, the last card that we just talked about was was the fastest selling card that we've had in Eternal MMA history, well and truly a sellout. So these cards are selling out faster and faster and faster. That is not hyperbole. Like, these things are hard to get tickets for. So take advantage of some of those early bird specials and get on the train for that Logan City card that we've got coming up on May 3rd. And then, back to the Gold Coast and back to Perth, where we'll continue the train rolling. This has been another breakdown from Bones and myself. Hope you enjoyed it. Please tune in for the next one, whatever that might be. I'll be back on the podcast where we talk another couple of fighters, maybe about the last card or whoever we get announced for the next card coming up. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled. Get your tickets for the upcoming cards, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much, Bonesy, for joining me as always. Love having you here, and we'll do this all again very soon, my man. Thank you.
Oh, my! That was huge!